I'm Autumn McMahon from Oklahoma Electric Cooperative in Norman, Oklahoma. Welcome to Along Those Lines.
Support for this podcast comes from Electric Research and Manufacturing Cooperative, Inc. ERMCO employees are proud to support America's electric cooperatives through their mission statement, our family working to keep your family powered.
Hi, everyone. This is a podcast about electric cooperatives, the work they do, and the challenges they face. I'm your host, Scott Hoffman. The ongoing global supply chain crisis, brought on by COVID-19 pandemic shutdowns and disruptions, and exacerbated by other factors, including the Russian invasion of Ukraine, has spurred double-digit inflation, frustrated companies and consumers, and driven the U.S. economy to the brink of recession. Many electric cooperatives are feeling the brunt of its impacts, facing unprecedented challenges in procuring key grid components like transformers, conductor, and power poles. Here to talk about how co-ops are leading the industry in finding ways to manage and mitigate this supply crunch are Martha Duggan, NRECA's Senior Regulatory Affairs Director, and Buddy Hasten, the President and CEO of Arkansas Electric Cooperative Corporation. One quick disclosure before we get to our conversation. The sponsor of this month's podcast, ERMCO, is a transformer manufacturer that is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Arkansas Statewide Association, which Buddy leads. Martha, Buddy, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Scott.
Okay, I want to start off with sort of a high-level look at what electric co-ops and other power providers are dealing with this supply challenge. Martha, what types of equipment, what types of services have been sort of critically short of supply for our industry?
So, Scott, we're seeing shortages in a number of pieces of equipment: distribution transformers, large power transformers, poles, pole treatment materials, conduit, anything that operates with a chip due to the chip shortage. So SCADA equipment, we're seeing shortages there.
And I know this is traceable fairly directly to the impact of the pandemic, but what would you say are the main factors at play in these delays and shortages?
Definitely a big wallop from the pandemic when everything slowed down. And so production slowed down, hiring slowed down, and then we came roaring back from the pandemic. And so we're seeing a great deal of demand for all the equipment that I mentioned before, as well as some other industrial events that are leading to the need for more of this type of equipment. So building EV charging stations, building some of the distributed energy resources, experiencing transportation issues, experiencing dock issues. All of those are contributing to what is kind of the perfect storm.
Yeah. And Buddy, are you seeing any shortages in your territory that are sort of unique to your territory? Is it sort of the same stuff that Martha's talking about?
I actually think it's very similar. I think it's very similar across the country. As we look and cast a wide net as to what the issues are, I think Martha captured it pretty well. There may be some very unique things in certain regions of the country that aren't on that list, but universally, the items that Martha talked about, and I think distribution transformers are by far the number one critical component. We've heard that loud and clear. Large power transformers probably right up there with it, and then you get into just basic poles and conductor and other stuff needed for the electrical grid. I think that's kind of what we're seeing across the board.
Yeah, I want to get into the transformers in a minute, but I wanted to see if there are specific impacts that you can talk about, not only at the G&T statewide level, but at the level of your distribution co-ops. What are the sort of on-the-ground impact of these shortages?
Well, immediate impact is you've got businesses that are trying to grow. You've got housing developments that are trying to get put in. And if you don't have a distribution transformer to put that in, then that project gets stalled. And so we've heard stories of workarounds where there should be a pad mount transformer for this particular development, and it wasn't available. So they put a pole in the ground and put a pole transformer up to act as a temporary until they can wait for the actual transformer to get there. Or in some cases, developers are just being told your project's going to have to be delayed because we can't get it done. What I'm aware are the most immediate impacts are a real slowdown in growth, whether it's new development of a small business or even housing. We've seen a lot of that. And I think the next thing is probably just high anxiety over the next storm, the next major event that happens, and just everybody being on pins and needles. Are we going to have enough stuff to restore the system the way we're accustomed to?
Yeah, and I do want to get into the distribution and the pad mount transformer discussion. ERMCO is part of the Arkansas Statewide, or was started by the Arkansas Statewide. It's a major national producer of transformers. I know you guys are doing everything you can to kind of ramp up production. What can you talk about that's specifically causing the shortage of these critical devices, and sort of some of the steps that you're doing to either mitigate it or work around?
Absolutely. Yeah, so talking about ERMCO for a bit, it is owned by the Arkansas Statewide. ERMCO, in just basic rough math, produces 25% of all the distribution transformers that are used in the U.S. So, about 1/4 of every transformer you see out there on a pad or a pole, ERMCO has produced it. The interesting story about ERMCO is in 2021, ERMCO made more transformers than they've made in the history of the company by a significant margin. So what we can say from that is there is not a lack of supply in the context of the manufacturer did not fall down and failed to produce an expected amount of transformers. What we can see is that demand has exploded to a point that the manufacturer cannot keep up. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about what we're doing at a federal level with ESCC, but that very statement is what caused a lot of other actions to need to be put into place to really understand what is going on. Because ERMCO would tell you that, hey, we made more transformers than we've ever made and we couldn't keep up. Now, they're continuing to make more transformers in 2022 than they did 21. If there's equipment that can be modernized, if there's things that we can do from capital spend and to make more transformers, I would say all that's being done. It really comes down right now to make more than we're making now. It would require a pretty significant shift in the amount of people that we staff there. And that we see would be the current barrier to pushing more stuff out at ERMCO.
Okay, so it's sort of a skilled labor thing more than a materials thing, or is it a combination of both?
I would say for ERMCO, the immediate barrier to more production is labor. But once you break through that bottleneck, there are certain bottlenecks to achieving maximum possible production. Then also what we need to do across the board as a nation is if we lifted that constraint off all manufacturers, what's the next bottleneck we hit? And so we are working to figure out what those bottlenecks are. But for today, ERMCO is not being limited by raw materials. I'm very proud that when we put made in the USA on an ERMCO transformer, the steel's made in the USA, the casing's made in the USA, the coils and cores are all made here. So we're not being hit with any type of import issues or things like that. We are not having raw material issues. It's really just how many people can we get in the factory working how many hours to make transformers, and that has been the limiting factor. But we still would say we're making more transformers than ever, just the need seems to be higher than it's ever been.
That's amazing. So Martha, what are you hearing from co-ops across the country? What are their specific challenges? How are they adapting? And I guess, are they asking NRECA for help?
Yeah, so Scott, I would take a page out of Jim Matheson's book when he often says, you've seen one co-op, you've seen one co-op. The situation varies across co-ops across the country. Some foresaw this need or happen to have inventory of distribution transformers, and so they're in pretty good shape. Others are really hurting, and as Buddy said, are very much on edge, thinking about the next hurricane. Are they going to be able to respond, or any other type of natural disaster? The other thing we're seeing is a lot of creativity to overcome the situation, at least in the short term. So I talked to a co-op last week who has a fair level of inventory. They're comfortable with it. They're also doing some pole replacements. And so as they take those transformers off the poles, they're giving them to a neighboring co-op who's refurbishing them and using those refurbished transformers to increase their inventory levels. We're seeing some sharing among co-ops, according to our cooperative principle. So there are a lot of really creative minds working out there to try and solve this problem in the short term, because as Buddy indicated, the real solution lies in the long term.
Yeah. I know you all have been lobbying the Department of Energy and the administration to sort of relax certain rules and to massage or to change rules that make it easier to not only produce, but to mass produce transformers. Can you talk about some of the efforts that you've done on that side and the successes you've had in that regard?
Sure. So we started in late last year when we first were hearing from members that they foresaw the shortage. We started raising this issue at the very highest levels of the federal government and communicated with Department of Energy Secretary Granholm, communicated with other high-level federal policymakers to make sure that this issue was on their radar. And we've gotten a fairly good response from the federal policymakers in terms of what they're willing to do to help us. As you know, Scott, President Biden has given the Department of Energy authorization under the Defense Production Act to try and solve the shortage issue. Now, how the DOE is going to use the Defense Production Act is something we all, and the effort's being led by Buddy, we are helping the Department of Energy think through what are the appropriate uses of the Defense Production Act.
That's great. I want to pause quickly here for a word from our sponsor. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the new Tiger Team. This is an industry-government partnership that will analyze and make recommendations about how to solve these supply and demand issues.
Along Those Lines is made possible by ERMCO, Inc. For 50 years, ERMCO has been the premier employer in the Mid-South, providing rewarding jobs to hundreds of families across Northwest Tennessee and beyond. An innovator and leader in the distribution transformer industry, ERMCO is keenly aware of its responsibility to provide the highest quality product to their customers, neighbors, and society. ERMCO is leaning into today's challenges to support the next 50 years of powering America's electric cooperatives.
I'm Jeff Powell from Rappahannock Electric Cooperative in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and you're listening to Along Those Lines.
Welcome back. Buddy, you touched on this earlier, the Electricity Subsector Coordinating Council, which is sort of the liaison group for utility CEOs to the federal government. They created in June what's called the Tiger Team to look at the supply issues and I assume make recommendations on how to fix it. They named several co-op CEOs to the team and they asked you to be the chair. Can you tell us about the structure of that group? I assume you all have met. Who's on the task force and what are you tasked with doing?
Sure. The group is made up of a representative from each of the trades. So NRECA, American Public Power, and EEI. So that's going to cover your municipals, your IOUs, and co-ops. So you got all sectors of utilities. And then there were 3 CEOs from each of those sectors. Cooperative CEOs on the ESCC Tiger Team are Tim Mills, the CEO of ERMCO, and he brings manufacturing experience. We've got Chris Perry, the CEO of the Kentucky Statewide, and he brings distribution experience in that Kentucky is a distributor of parts. And we've got Bob Bison, who is the CEO of NOVEC, Northern Virginia Electric Cooperative, and he brings a member owner, consumer, user of critical infrastructure perspective. And then serving as the chairman really does give the cooperative sector a fourth voice, one more advocate at the table, and I think that strategically that's a really good thing for the cooperative sector. And then we have 3 CEOs of public power, and then you got 3 different investor-owned utilities represented, AEP, SWEPCO, Ameren, and it's escaping me what the third utility is, but a lot of them will have their vice president or procurement or somebody who's really knowledgeable about supply chain issues. And so it's a good cross-sectional look at, you've got executive leadership, you've got supply chain, we've even got some manufacturing and distribution, retail distribution folks. So it's a good group of people with the trades all being represented in the meetings that we're on. And then the rest of the story is really Department of Energy. The Department of Energy brings a pretty significant cast of people to the meetings to cover sort of all different angles so that they, 1, understand the issue, and 2, know which resources they need to bring to bear. And I think I'll focus for a minute. I shared with you the ERMCO story, and I know that story because of being affiliated with ERMCO. And I understand the Arkansas story of what our distribution co-ops and even our retail business that goes out to a 5-state territory. But that's just one view. And what we don't know is every other view the same. So while ERMCO may not be suffering from a shortage of raw materials, they only account for 1/4 of the transformers. What about the other 3/4? What about those manufacturers? And we know what demand is doing here, but we don't know exactly across the country, is demand doing the same thing, and why is it doing that? So I think the most important thing that this Tiger Team has been really drilling down on is if you want to solve a problem, you have to really understand the true root causes of a problem to solve it. long term or even in the immediate. And so there's been a ton of energy focused on the supply side. So getting good information from all of these manufacturers to understand their specific scenario, right? Because it may be different across different manufacturers in different regions of the country. At the same time, sending out and asking for data from the demand side, which is all of the utilities. And so the three trades have taken on to go off and gather information for this Tiger team to try to codify what has caused this increased demand. Is it we ran out during COVID and we're trying to catch up? Is it old infrastructure that's just worn out and it's time to be replaced and this is just that natural time? Is it electrification and now there's a lot more stuff coming on and more charging, more stuff, and so that's driving a need to modernize and upgrade systems? Truly trying to understand the demand side of the equation and the supply side of the equation so that we can get those back in balance.
That's great. Is there a report at the end, or is there going to be guidance sort of issued along the way as you've kind of come to a consensus on what's causing certain pain points?
So the Tiger team is broken up into 3 different working groups. So there's a working group that's solely focused on distribution transformers because the sensitivity to that product was so high, it demanded its own working group. Then we've got a working group looking at just poles and conductors. And then we've got a working group looking at large power transformers and everything else. So each working group will put out some work product, a report, if you will, but it's all being culminated and collected at the Department of Energy. And then Department of Energy, I think, will put out a report. And then we as a team can sit down and try to guide and direct, working with Department of Energy to say, now that we understand the supply side of the equation and the demand side of the equation, now is the time to say, what are the most effective tools from government or anywhere else to get the equation back in balance, and what's the most cost-effective and fastest way to do that?
Okay, great. And so, Martha, what's on the NRECA side, what are you bringing to the table? You're in the meetings. You're giving sort of national perspective on things, I assume?
I am, and I just would add to Buddy's great description of the Tiger team a couple of things. Number one, this issue is so top of mind for folks. We meet once a week. And we meet once a week on Friday afternoons, and the meetings are full. The subgroups meet once a week on different days. The work of the Tiger team by its charter is due to be complete by December 31st of this year. So we're really going at a very rapid clip, and the role of the trades has been somewhat logistical. We schedule the meetings, we take meeting notes, we give some context, but we really are there to support the work of the CEOs and the supply chain executives that are involved in the Tiger team.
Okay. Yeah, I had no idea it was that aggressive an effort. I didn't know it was weekly meetings. That's fantastic. Martha, I want to get a sense from you. The fact that they've asked Buddy to chair this. This is a co-op CEO who has been asked to chair this, really, really important group. What do you think that says about the co-op program and the value that the DOE puts on our perspective?
Well, I think it says a number of things. I think it's the recognition of Buddy and his experience and his work with the ESCC. He's been a CEO member of the ESCC for a while, and I think that's been recognized by DOE, as well as his unique perspective in terms of having this affiliation with a manufacturer and having affiliation with distribution cooperatives. His experience and his leadership cuts across all of the areas of the industry affected by the shortage. So I think DOE recognized that, and I think it was a great choice.
One of the factors we mentioned earlier is that there's preparation or was preparation going on in advance of hurricane season and summer storm season. We've had a sort of a thankfully quiet hurricane season so far, but I think there's some evidence that that's not going to last. Martha, have you seen co-ops in particularly storm-prone areas? Have they been able to do enough to prepare? Are they able to stockpile a reserve inventory for when storms do hit?
Again, Scott, I think it varies from co-op to co-op. What I have seen is a lot of communication and coordination between the co-ops and the statewides in these storm-prone areas to try and plan ahead and see if there are possibilities for sort of a mutual assistance regarding distribution transformers. So fingers crossed we continue to have a quiet storm season.
Yeah, I'd like that too. So I wanted to ask you both for your assessment on where you think this is going. I mean, I know these things come in waves and they have a little sine curve, and I think we're hoping to be on the sort of the crest of it and moving back down. Do you think that's true? Are we seeing signs that we've turned a corner, or can we expect these challenges to last a while longer? Buddy, I'll start with you, and then I'll turn to you, Martha.
I don't think we know. I think in certain segments, there's probably some comfortability just based on, some utilities were probably more effective at securing long-term contracts and supply than others. So I think it's a mixed bag of, concern or how prepared people feel. But right now, I think ERMCO is still getting calls and still turning people away at the door to order transformers. And so I don't feel like that has slowed at all. Whether demand will cool off due to things in the economy, and everything else, that would have an impact on it. And I think that's why it's so critical that we understand not just the supply side, because right now everybody just assumes, there's a shortage of transformers because we ran out of something. I don't necessarily know if that's the case at all. It could be something vastly different. And what we did is we finally just grew out of our manufacturing capability. But the question is it a short-term boost in demand, or is this going to be long and sustained given all of the change? When you look at all the infrastructure money that's going toward electrification, renewable energy, things like that, is this something that's going to be around for a while? And I think understanding that is key. But I do think that people are going to go through the rest of 22 and probably into 2023 with managing this like we have been and looking for some relief longer term.
Yeah. What about you, Martha?
Well, the hope is that we will get some visibility into how long this will last with the results of the survey that Buddy mentioned that the Tiger team is doing. The demand side survey was sent to all NRECA distribution cooperative CEOs, asking them to work with their supply chain folks and get responses back to us. It will be collated, it will be anonymous, but I hope it will give us a picture of how long will this last and where we're going for the next steps.
Yeah. I wanted to throw one more in here about there's a whole lot of federal money about to kind of be fed into the system to go toward infrastructure, lots of other things. But among the goals for that spend is to improve the infrastructure of the electric grid. Are you worried that that is going to exacerbate the problem? Because that money is going to come online in the next year or so. Is that going to contribute to this perfect storm? I'll start with you, Martha.
I think unless we're very careful about it, it may, but I would like to think that we can message to the federal government as it plans how to spend this money, a way to stage it and phase it so that it doesn't have the unintended consequence of making the situation worse rather than better.
Okay. And Buddy, have you talked about that in the Tiger Team group at all? Is that a concern among your peers?
Yeah, I think once again, we've lumped it all into the demand side question, right? So part of this survey sort of asks, hey, what's your past usage of transformers been? What is it, now? And sort of what do you expect it to be? I don't think we actually ask people to say, hey, given all this infrastructure money, what do you think it will be? But I do think we try to ask people to forecast a bit as to where do you think your demand is going to be? And also sort of, why is your demand where it is? There are some open-ended responses in the survey for people to try to inform us, meaning I'm ordering all these transformers because I have no supply in inventory, so I'm catching up. Or it could be I have a normal amount of inventory, I just have this much usage. I'm using this many transformers. There's a lot of different answers, and so the survey tries to give the CEO or the co-op a lot of opportunity to provide information so that we can bring the best solutions to bear and the best resources that industry and the government have to offer.
That's true. And honestly, your leadership on this is making a difference. I appreciate both of you for coming on the podcast and sharing your insights. That it's a strange time. I mean, we have growth in co-op territories. That's a good thing, but this is turning into sort of a challenge that wasn't expected. So I want to thank you again for being on the podcast and sharing what you know.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
And thanks to you, our listeners, and to our sponsor, ERMCO. For more on this and other podcasts, visit us at electric.coop. Until next time, for Along Those Lines, I'm Scott Hoffman.
I'm April Lawler from Coast Electric in Kill, Mississippi. Thanks for listening to Along Those Lines. Subscribe and rate us on your favorite podcast app.